Today's guest is an Emmy award-winning journalist for National Geographic who dives into some of the world's most dangerous black and gray markets. From cartels, extremist groups, scammers, and trafficking, she's seen it all. I wanted her on the show because of the way she stays calm under pressure. It's something that we can all learn from and maybe even use in our own lives. Please welcome Mariana Van Zeller. Mariana, thank you so much for being here today. I know that the work that you do is not easy, but we're excited to get into it.
Thank you, Jade.
Would love to just start by you kind of giving our audience a little brief overview of who you are and how you got into investigative journalism.
Yeah, absolutely. So grew up in Portugal and pretty much decided I wanted to be a journalist when I was 12 years old. I used to watch the nightly news with my family. It was sort of mandatory watching every night. And I watched these Portuguese anchors on television talking about the whole world with just so much authority and knowledge. And I thought they had memorized all these facts about what was happening with the economy in China, violence in Brazil, politics in America, whatever it was. And I thought these were the smartest human beings on earth. And I wanted to have all this knowledge like them. I didn't know they were reading from a teleprompter. But that's pretty much when I decided I wanted to be a journalist. And then I went to university in Portugal, and then I knew I wanted to go to Columbia University's journalism school. It's one of the best universities in the world for journalism. And I started applying. I applied the first year, I didn't get in. I applied the second year, I didn't get in. The second year I actually was put on a wait list, but I didn't get in. I was devastated. And then the third year, I decided I was going to fly to New York, and I did, and I knocked on the dean's door, and I introduced myself, and that was the year that I was accepted to Columbia, and then, that was the beginning of it all.
That's a lesson in determination.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
It was my first big lesson in journalism was don't give up. Right?
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious from your perspective, how do you know when you're obviously building these incredible stories and doing your pre-production? I don't think people realize when they see the things on screen and like the finalized pieces, how much pre-production goes into it. So given that, how do you know when a story is ready to go from pre-production to actually like going in the field and shooting something?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we have to pick the story, right? So for Trafficked, we've done 5 seasons, so that's almost 50 episodes because we do 10 episodes every season. And even the picking of the stories, because it's about black markets, right? Crime, the underworld, black markets, so guns, scams, drugs. I now forgot what the show's about. Assassins, all the sort of the hidden side of the economy that actually accounts for an estimated 35% of the global economy. And people don't know this. And all of these things have a huge impact on our lives. So first of all, the story selection, we have to pick something that is within this black market, this criminal underworld that we believe has an impact on us, Americans. Obviously, I work out of America. I live in America. National Geographic is based in the United States, so it's important that it resonates with an American audience. However, it's also a global show because I do end up traveling all around the world and telling stories, scams or drug trafficking or wildlife trafficking. These are issues that affect us all. But story selection is important. Once we select that story, then starts a grueling process of pre-production, which mostly is about trying to gain access, because the show is about gaining access to the hidden underworlds and to people who've spent their entire lives trying to stay hidden and living secret lives, right? And we're trying to convince people to talk to us, which is almost impossible. So we spend months, sometimes even years, getting tons of no's, and that's what doesn't show up on screen, right? Lots of people who say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable. I mean, I've done trips to the other side of the world to meet with people who gave me hope that it was going to be a possibility, and then I get there and actually they don't feel comfortable. And I tell everybody, look, I'm here with empathy, not with judgment. I'm trying to understand why you do what you do. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Once it does, once we start gaining access to some of these underworld players, then we realize, okay, it's time to go in the field and start filming this. But again, that can take months, sometimes even years.
And when you go into the field and kind of start filming, do you in your mind have the story worked out at any point yet? Or like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, we do. National Geographic is very demanding about making sure that we have I mean, we write sort of, it's not a script per se, but it's an outline.
Well, you have voiceover, right?
Right.
To kind of thread things.
The voiceover is
at the
after.
end. Okay.
So before we have an outline that we send them, where we believe this is going to be Act 1, this is where we want to start. There's this guy that agreed to talk to us about drugs or whatever. Then I think it would be interesting to go to a victim, or we have a general idea of what it's going to look. But it never is the case. I mean, as soon as we hit the ground, either people decide they don't want to talk, or the story is much bigger than we initially thought, or actually the story isn't there. It's in another neighboring country. I mean, I've done stories of immigration that took me to Morocco, African immigration to Europe. And when I got there, I realized actually most of the African immigrants were getting stuck in Mauritania. So then we had to move all the production to Mauritania. So yeah, it's always changing.
Can you share an example again of like when you've had to kind of make those quick decisions on the fly? So when you're in a story and you're like, okay, like for example, the one that you just said, like, is there other moments that kind of come to mind?
Yeah, there's a great one actually. So for the first episode we did for this season, it's called Cartel USA. It was the first episode that aired in season 5. And it's about cartel presence here in the United States and how it's sort of being infiltrating everywhere from small town America to big cities. But in order to gain access to the cartel players in the US, we had to go to Sinaloa, Mexico, where I have a lot of connections, and try to get the green light from somebody in Sinaloa, from like a boss in Sinaloa that would allow us to talk to somebody here in the US. And we did. And again, it took us a long time. We finally got the boss. And he had several bodyguards, armed people behind him. Actually got really tricky in the moment because the Marines showed up close. They were close by in the neighborhood, and we had to leave. It was not the most comfortable interview. But after a while, he trusted us. He believed we were journalists. We'd gotten connected through a contact we share. And eventually he said, okay, I'm going to meet you in this one state, which was at the time, I believe, and I hope I'm not going to have this up, but I believe it was Minnesota. Yeah, I'm going to meet you in Minnesota. And we got all excited. We waited a few weeks. He gave us a date and a place. And we got there and we waited, and he never showed up. And then he got a call after a few days, and he said, I needed to make sure that you guys didn't have a tail, and I am not actually in Minnesota. I'm in another state, which we didn't reveal in the episode which one it was, but it was a completely different state. So then we had to go to a completely different state and sort of wait for him again. And then eventually he showed up, and he showed us sort of a cocaine transaction.
So he was just testing you to go to Minnesota.
Yeah. Yeah, and that happens a lot.
Really?
Meetings in places where then they are just monitoring us and making sure that we're not being followed. Because even if they trust us, they want to make sure that we're not being followed by law enforcement, or that, at the end of the day, they want to make sure that we are also the people we say we are, which are journalists and not agents.
And has law enforcement ever tried to follow you?
No, not that I know of. And it's interesting because a lot of people ask us that it's very important for a free and working democracy that there's a separation between the government and a free press, right? Mm-hmm. It's in the First Amendment, free press, right? And so I've been contacted by law enforcement, but not asking me what my sources were or the locations of the places I've been filming. They've asked me to come to conferences and talk about what I've learned or my expertise about the opioid crisis, because I've reported on that extensively, but never about certain contacts or locations. And the other day, I actually was speaking to an FBI contact of mine, and we had been reporting on he'd been investigating, and I'd been reporting on the same story at the same time. And so I was asking him, you knew I was investigating this. At any moment did you have did you think about following me? And he said, absolutely not. And any FBI agent will tell you that that's not what they do. They will seek informants, and they have their own way of investigating, but they will never try to piggyback on the investigation of a journalist, because that's dangerous for all of us.
Okay, that's really interesting to note. So I was speaking with actually another journalist in Sinaloa that you were a place that you're very familiar with, and we were doing a different project together. I was producing a show, and she had said to me that I asked her, like, how do you stay safe? Like, what is your approach to this world? Like, tell me more. And her sort of response to that I thought was really, really interesting. She said, Jade, I don't break news. I will cover things that have already happened and highlight stories that have already have like a clear sort of ending, whether this person has been convicted or whether like the dust has settled a little bit. She feels more comfortable playing in that space, but still telling more nuanced stories around that. I'm curious from your perspective, do you have sort of like a best practice around what you're comfortable with breaking news, or how do you think about that? Because the stories that you're telling, a lot of the times you are breaking news, right? And that does sometimes come with consequences.
I don't think the difference is between breaking news or doing stories that have already been told. For me, it's more about what type of journalism am I doing? Am I doing gotcha journalism, where I'm going to show in the house of a drug trafficker or a scammer with a camera and I'm going to expose him? That's not the type of journalism that I do. I mean, that's law enforcement's job, in my opinion. My job as a journalist is to expose the problem, the tactics, the reality of these undergrounds and these black markets, but not expose the people. Because in many ways, I think we learn much more, and it's much more helpful for all of us if I can gain access and try to understand why people do what they do, right? And that's why it takes so long. I want them to trust me. It doesn't mean that I don't hold them accountable. It doesn't mean that I condone what they do, of course. But I do think that understanding the why is much more important than the exposing, because that will give you short-term results, right? You expose this one scammer, you show up with a camera, oh, this is the guy that's scamming, but I'm going to know nothing about why he does what he does, his tactics, how he operates. And so being able to actually sit down with him and have a 1 hour, 2 hour, several hour conversation with a person to understand that world is, I think, a much better use of my time and of, and of the audiences, our audience as well.
Yeah, I would agree. And how did you develop this journalistic style? So you have a very distinct style. Like you're very well thought out in your questioning when you're speaking to these different people, and you do humanize them. So I'm curious, how that style kind of developed for you over time.
Yeah, I think it was not what I set out to do, but it's I think who I am. I am definitely not perfect. I am terrible. I have lots of flaws. But one thing I always try to do, and I think I always have, is place myself in people's shoes. So even if I'm sitting across somebody that I completely disagree, that does, is a horrific criminal, when I am talking to that person, I'm constantly in my mind trying to understand, how did this person get there? And I think that's naturally what I do. And throughout, when I started as a journalist, one of the first stories I did was actually in Syria. I'd moved to Syria when they were in Iraq. Iraq started. And I wanted to learn Arabic. I wanted to start working as a freelance journalist there. And eventually, my first story was about the Syrian jihadis, the mujahideen, foreign fighters that were crossing from Syria to Iraq to fight against the Americans. And it was the first of this type of storytelling or report that came from there at the time. I was like 29 years old. I was just starting my freelance career, 28 years old, something like that. And I found myself, sitting across what we considered in the West a terrorist, right? And he was, I was surprised because I was expecting, I was in New York during 9/11. I saw what it did. I still, every time I get emotional because it brings me back to that day. And I reported on that day. And I will never forget the people on the streets looking for their loved ones. So that's something that's going to stay with me and has traumatized me. So when I'm in Syria reporting on the people that we consider the terrorists, right, I was expecting someone that I had no connection with and that I would never be able to empathize with. And here I am interviewing one of these foreign fighters. And it turns out that he's sort of the town clown. Like kids, he's surrounded by kids following him everywhere. He's a normal guy. He sat down, and this is controversial for me to say, and I know it sometimes rubs people the wrong way, but he knelt down on his knees and started singing the Celine Dion song from Titanic that he knew by heart, even though he didn't speak English.
Like, My Heart Will Go On.
My Heart Will Go On. I kid you not. And that because he was obsessed with Titanic and had watched it so many times that he'd memorized the song in English, even though he didn't speak English. It was incredible. And to me, that was the first moment that I realized, yeah, he must be doing he might be doing horrible things. He's killing Americans. But there is a humanity here that in some ways is almost even scarier, right? Because I think if the world were that black and white, and if we could just paint people as black, then it would be much easier to just decide we wanted to kill them all.
Yeah.
But it's not. And it's scarier that a family man, a man that's loved by his town, who has children, that he can then turn to believe that America is the culprit of all evil and that he has to go and kill Americans to protect his community and his family. That to me was scarier. And through that experience, I decided that this is the kind of reporting that I want to start doing. I want to start understanding why the people that we consider the bad guys, why they do what they do.
And do you think that's, first of all, fascinating? And do you think that having that sort of ability to see the human element in someone, do you think that's the thing that has probably kept you safe through all of this?
I think in many ways, yes. I think that if you respect people, they will respect you back. If you treat people as human beings, they will do the same. I think people ask me if I travel with security guards, and absolutely not. Sometimes, I've done stories in Niger, in areas surrounded by terrorist groups, and the only way to go into those areas is with military escorts, sometimes with security people. But in general, it is counterproductive to the work that I do, because it is all about gaining trust, and the way to gain trust is by showing trust and showing respect. Again, this does not mean that I don't hold people accountable. And if you see my work, you see that I ask people all the questions that I think a journalist should ask. But at the end of the day, if there are immigrants, too many immigrants coming into this country and exploiting our broken immigration policies, is it the fault of the immigrants, or is it the fault of our government for not protecting our border? If there are people selling fake medications to us from Indian fake pharmaceutical companies, is it the fault of the Indian government, or should the accountability? Yes, I'm going to ask the people that I meet that are making these fake pharmaceuticals tough questions, but really the people that we should all hold accountable most of all is our government, right? Because why is it that, I think it's something, I can't remember the exact number, but it's millions of Americans that have to resort to the black market because they can't afford their medication. It's the fault of a broken healthcare system. So I think that that's very important, and that's what I keep in mind, particularly when I spend so much time interviewing people who are, a 16-year-old kid carrying a pack of cocaine on his bag. And when I ask him why he does this really hard work, actually, he's seen many of his friends being killed in front of him. He carries cocaine over the mountains in Peru. And I ask him, why do you do what you do? And he says, because I want to be a dentist and I want to go to school, and my family is poor and they can't afford for me to go to school. And so how can you not want to humanize these people and empathize with them?
Absolutely. And I think something that comes off in your work is that you say, well, look, these people are just doing what they see fit within their community, and what they see is the path to success, and what they see is normal. So it's like, if all of your friends are doing this as a career path, you don't think that it's as strange as it might be to us, right? From our perspective. So I think having that is really helpful.
Absolutely. I think it's not only these black markets exist because of inequality, right? We have half of the world's population living on under $7 a day. 10% of the population lives under the poverty line. So as long as there's inequality, there is going to be violence. There are going to be these black markets. And then there's also the place and conditions and situation in which you grow up and you live. I remember interviewing a pimp here in LA, and him telling me that when I asked him, why a pimp? He's like, in my neighborhood, I didn't, the heroes weren't the doctors or the teachers or the lawyers. The heroes were the pimps, because they were the ones coming back with money and distributing it with our community. They were the ones with the fancy watches and the expensive cars, right? So those are the people that most of the youth in my community grew up to admire. And that's why I'm a pimp.
It's like the version of a basketball player, professional athlete, whatever that would be. That's so interesting.
Yeah. And again, you don't condone what he does, of course, but at least there's an understanding, a framework that you can build off, right?
Yeah, but it's hard work what you're doing, because it's not an easy like black or white, yes or no situation. And like in people's mind, this is why the media is the way it is and things are so polarizing, is because it is difficult for us to compartmentalize things and see the 360 view of people. Like it's just harder. So our brains want to say, oh, this is a bad guy, it's fine. And then that calms our brains down and it lets us kind of move forward with our day. We don't want to think, oh, is there a terrorist in the Middle East that is actually, you know, maybe a great dad? Like, because that throws us off and it feels a lot harder to cope with, and people are just trying to get through their days themselves.
That is exactly right. You hit it the nail on the head. I'm terrible with, I always say the wrong...
Analogy?
Analogies too, but I think that's how you say it, right? The nail on the head.
Hit the nail on the head. Yeah, you got it.
Hit the nail on the head. I think you said that's exactly it. It's much easier for us to think that there's a clear division between bad people and good people, because that way we feel safer, right? Because then there can't possibly be bad people around us, because that's over there, not over here. But that's just not the case. And unfortunately, I think that thinking has bled into not only dividing people who are criminals or outlaws to people who are law-abiding citizens, but it is now in our political sphere as well, where, as you know, you are either this way, and you know, I've gotten so much shit on both sides. Like I'm very active on social media. If I post something that's very pro liberal, I get shit from the right. If I post something that's remotely centric, I get shit from the left. People telling me, even today I posted something, and which I thought was a very thoughtful response to something that happened in the news recently. And immediately it was like somebody who lives here in LA, like a director who says, fuck you. That was his response to me for me sharing my thoughts. And my thoughts were not extreme or excessive, but it's that idea that you're either with us or against us, right? Yeah. You're either this or that. You're either a bad person or a good person. You're either a liberal or a Republican, and you can't be a little bit of both. And it's a simplification of the world that's just not the reality of the world, right? We can be both things at the same time.
Oh, 100%. And like, I also think that comment, first of all, says a lot more about that person than you. Because when's the last time you, all caps, fuck you, responded to someone on social?
Never.
Like, probably never.
Never.
Yeah. But I think for me, even like, so I'm obviously like an immigrant in this country. I cannot vote. So I just personally try to stay a little away from it. But I share that with you. Like, I have friends on both sides. For me, I think you have to take everything case by case. And that's been my approach to it.
And quite frankly, I think it's about the best way in both the work that I do as a journalist, but in general as a human being, is we should be building bridges, right? Yeah. We should be trying to connect. And at the time when our country is more polarized than ever, I think building those bridges is very important. I'm trying to do this with, you know, people we consider the bad guys, but I think in general, particularly now, also in politics, it's important to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, for you too, like, you're an immigrant into this country as well. And now you have a child here. Yeah. So it's important. Like, you want to look around and feel like, you know, life in the future is going to be better for your son. Yeah. You know what I mean? And he's going to grow up in a place that's better. Like, people fundamentally want to look ahead and see that.
Yeah.
So
and that we can all respect each other's different opinions without making this a life of death or death situation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, switching gears a little bit here, I'm very, very curious. I recently did a project in Korea, and it got me like really thinking and understanding more about AI and how they're using it over there, which was fascinating. I'm curious, in black and gray markets, if you've seen AI tools being implemented, and if there's anything that you could share there, because I feel like that technology is going to open up some crazy floodgates.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, particularly in scams. It is crazy how much the scam industry has grown in just the past 5 years. So one of the first stories I pitched National Geographic for Trafficked, that I wanted to do on Trafficked, was a story about scams. It was about the lottery scams, which at the time was the main type of scams. It was the phone. We were getting phone calls and people saying, you know, you won the lottery, and to do so you need to pay this fee. That was the only scams, or the main scam that was out there at the time. And we ended up doing a story about that. This was 5 years ago. Since then, the scam and fraud industry has surpassed the drug trafficking industry. So we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars a year in scamming and fraud. In 2024, last year, $12.5 billion were lost to Americans to scams. Just America, let alone the rest of the world. So we've got a real problem with scamming. And because of AI, it's only getting worse. And I've seen this being employed. We did the story about these scam factories in Myanmar and Thailand, next to Thailand. And we were with a scammer who told us it was actually a woman. And she was actually forced to do the work that she was doing in many ways. But she was telling us how they use AI on her face when her clients want to make sure that they're talking to the real person. They do these video calls, right? And they put the face of whoever they want through AI. So the client, the victim on the other side believes he's talking to a real person. And it is uncanny how good it is, how good the technology is, how it actually looks like I'm speaking to that person. And now I've received messages from victims all over the world. Recently, it was a scamming victim here in the United States who believed she was talking to John Bon Jovi. And she showed me several videos of John Bon Jovi on her phone, saying, "Good morning, XX, I love you, I miss you." And obviously it was not John Bon Jovi. And it's scary. It's very, very scary.
That's my mom's favorite artist, so.
Is it really? Yeah. Do you want me to get John Bon Jovi?
Yeah, get the number, please. Oh, that's so crazy, though.
It is crazy. And voice AI, too. I mean, they can redo your voice and fake your voice, and it's very sad. You've got these grandmas all around the country thinking they're talking to their grandkids who are in trouble, and they're willing to pay whatever it takes to get their kids out of trouble, and they're not talking to their kids. It's an AI fake voice.
And I think a thing with scamming, too, is there's a lot of shame around it.
Yes, there is.
So I feel like if I were personally to get scammed, I'm trying to think, like, who do you tell?
Yeah.
Right? Like, who do you tell about that? And like, are you going to go to the police? Like, what are you kind of going to do there?
Absolutely. There's unfortunately a lot of shame because there's a lot of stereotyping. People think that if you fall for a scam, you have to be dumb. And there's no way it would not happen to me, right? But it does. It can happen to anyone. And they're getting better and better at what they do. I think the saddest scam stories I've reported on have actually been about teenage or young adult men who it's the sextortion scam where they're forced or they're convinced to share photos of their private parts, and then many of them commit suicide. And they start extorting them for money, and then the shame is so big and heavy that they end up committing suicide. And that's just horrific, but it's happening.
Mm-hmm. That is terrible. Yeah, I do remember that episode, and you talked to the mom. Very dark.
Oh, yeah. We started by talking to the mom, and then we traced the call and the messages of the scammer all the way to the Philippines, and we ended up talking to scammers in the Philippines.
It's really sad. I mean, going on a little bit more of a happy note, something I do also love about your work is, you are covering really dark things, but there is a lightness there in the work that you do, and there is like a kind of silver lining. So an example would be like the time that you did this story about the surrogates, for example, and what that was like, and we actually got to watch a mother and a father get a child, and that was like really beautiful. Are there any stories for you that like come to mind where you're like, okay, this one seemed like it was going to be sad or dark, but actually ended up a little bit more positive than I thought?
That's a good question. I mean, there are moments obviously like that where it was a beautiful moment. Yeah, we saw these parents who couldn't have their own, carry their own child, get a surrogate in Ukraine. They went in during the war and were able to, and we were there when they held their baby for the first time, and that was really beautiful. I think in general, I would say that the message of the show of Trafficked and the work that I've done for so many years actually is the silver lining, because the message at the end is that even the people that we consider the bad guys are people just like you and I. They're mothers, they're fathers, they're our neighbors, and that it is because of inequality most of the times, or because of the situations in which they grew up, that they become who they are. And I think that has given me enormous hope about humanity and about our world. The fact that I can sit across, from a scammer, a trafficker, all these people, and I can still find humanity and I can still connect is pretty special. It shows that there's redemption possible there,
I mean, that is the silver lining in all of this, to be honest with you. I think that that's definitely where it is. When I think about the show as a whole, you travel all over the world, like truly all over the world. Is there a place that's surprised you the most that you've been?
The weirder or stranger or more different it is from where I grew up, from the West, the more I like it, right? So there are places, we did a story in Niger for season 4 where we got caught in a military coup in Niger. But I remember that sense of arrival in Niger. And we were in Agadez, which is in the Sahel region of Africa, so right on the south of the Sahara Desert. And there have been, salt routes there, trade routes for years, for centuries, gold trafficking, human trafficking, gun trafficking. But it's also beautiful. It's the desert. It's got these tribal communities. It's just stunningly beautiful and unlike anything you've ever seen. There's camels, and it's very, very unbearably hot, but also very, very beautiful. And those are the kind of places that when I'm there, I've got a smile the whole time, and I'm in my happy place.
I love that. And I mean, it's crazy that you're still saying such positive things about it, given your experience there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've never met warmer people. It was some of the kindest people I've ever met. Really? Was in Niger. So we got stuck in a military coup. We went there to do a story about gold trafficking and how it was funding terrorist organizations. And suddenly there was a military coup, and they closed the borders and the airspace, and we were stuck in this small town without any way out. And we lost our military convoy, our military protection. And this is an area that
How did you lose that?
Because the military coup happened, and so the president was not the president anymore, right. And there was a new person in power. A military man, and they were called to defend the coup leaders.
Right.
And so we lost all protection. And this is an area with Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, ISIS, all criminal groups are there, all terrorist groups are there, plus kidnapping squads and whatnot. And which is why we had military protection in the first place, because that's not usually the norm. But it was the only way to do this safely. And suddenly we're there, we're stuck, there's no way out. And there's an impending war. There is a brewing war happening because neighboring countries were threatening to invade. Russia was threatening to send troops or to send the Wagner group to defend the new military coup leader. And so the situation was getting very hairy. And then suddenly people started getting evacuated. French, the Italians, the British, they were all evacuated. And we had no way of getting to the capital where people were being evacuated. We were just stuck. And it was horrible. It was the 9 worst days of my life. I'm not an anxious person. I was incredibly anxious. My son was happily at camp, so he had no idea this was happening. And eventually, it's actually an amazing story because after many days, my team here in LA was able to find a plane with 2 crazy enough pilots that were willing to travel to Niger to save us and to rescue us in the middle of the night. And at the moment that I arrived at the airport, I'd made friends with the airport manager, who was an amazing guy called Kader. And I told Kader, look, I have a son who's in the United States, and it's his birthday next week, and I have to get back to his birthday. And Kader showed me photos of his children, and he said, I understand what you're going through, and I'm going to do anything in my power to get you safely out of my country. Meanwhile, he was stuck. I mean, there was no way for Kader to get out. And so when Kader found out that there was a plane coming to rescue us, Kader showed up at the airport at 6 a.m. To make sure that we were safe. And when we got there was lots of military men that had found out the plane was coming, and they weren't happy, and they didn't want to let us leave. And it was Kader and his negotiating that convinced them in many ways to allow us to leave. And part of us and my team in LA, and a bunch of things happened. So eventually I'm running to the plane. My team is all on the plane, and I'm running to the plane to get out of there. And Kader yells at me and says, Mariana. And I said, oh my God, it's trouble. What happened? And I look back and he says, say happy birthday to your son. And these are the moments and these are the people that I will never forget, right? It's incredible. It's pretty special.
That's going to make me emotional.
Yeah,
oh my God. Wow.
It's pretty incredible.
No, and I think I mean, the whole point of like this show and what I'm trying to do here is actually like, you know, show women like kind of more tangible skills. And I think your specific superpower in all of this is the ability to find common ground with people. And like just even within that story, I think that is such a beautiful ability. So going further into that, I feel like if you can sit there and talk to all of these, you know, different people with vastly different backgrounds to you, how is that? Like how have you been able to do that?
Yeah. I think it's about sharing a little bit of yourself always, and I always try to do that. Before we even turn on the cameras, there's always a moment before where I'm talking to the person that I'm about to interview, or even when they're setting up the mics or turning on the cameras or whatever it is. And I do this, by the way, with everyone, not just the people I interview. But I think it's just, you know, I share a cigarette or a drink, or I show a photo of my son. I always do that. I show a photo of my son, and I say, oh, I have a son. Do you have children? Or what's your favorite food? I love talking about food in general. So this is something that we all can share. We have something in common, right? And it's just like treating people like human beings, and being curious about who they are. It's not rocket science, actually. It's pretty easy. I think generally I'm very curious about people. I love talking to them. I also like to smoke cigarettes when I get nervous. So it's the perfect combination.
And how do you know when to like push for an answer versus kind of when to pull back a little bit? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's I think sometimes I go a little bit too far. I've gotten people very mad at my questions. You know, I got an assassin here in LA threatened to shoot us if he wasn't happy, and that didn't go so well. But and that was because I was asking emotional questions. Actually, I was asking him, how does he do with what he does, kill people for a living when he has children at home, and he didn't like that question. And so, yeah, I think sometimes I go a little too far, but I think it's, you know, making a person feel comfortable. This doesn't happen within a few minutes, right? I'm sitting across from them. We're, you know, after some time, I sort of sense, okay, this person is comfortable, and I can start asking questions that I think are important. Like, how do you feel about trafficking fentanyl into this country, knowing that it's killing, you know, it's killed 1 million Americans, or the opiate crisis has killed 1 million Americans? How do you feel about scamming people and knowing that some of them are committing suicide? Those are all obviously important questions, and I don't not ask them. I ask them.
And when you're sitting down chatting with these people and you get a sense that someone's like lying to you, how do you handle that?
I push back. I tell them that I think they're lying to me. I did that with an organ trafficker. He was telling me about all the horrible things he was doing. He was telling me that he was opening up people alive and taking their organs, and I smelled bullshit, and it just sounded that he was just trying to, you know, boast about something that he didn't do at all. And then he actually showed me a video that we didn't air, but we showed me looking at the video in the story that we did on organ trafficking. But I also turned to the camera once he left, and I talked about the things that I thought were real and the things I didn't. So my doubts about the reality of it all, because of course I'm talking to people who are, you know, many of them natural liars, who lie for a living, right? By not revealing what they do. So but I make that very transparent and very obvious in the storytelling.
What a weird thing to lie about.
Right? It's so weird. He works for a big cartel, the Cartel del Golfo in Colombia. And I think we got access to him through his boss. And I think he was trying to brag about all the amazing, incredible, very violent things that the cartel does, and how they make so much money from drugs and guns, but also organs.
And do you think he just got a fake video and showed it to you?
I'm not sure till this day. And I did see the video. He wouldn't share the video with us after, but it was a video of somebody's body being opened up. But I'm not sure to this day. But again, I made that very clear.
You must have a good stomach.
I actually do have a good stomach, yes. I do have a good stomach, but I cry very easily.
Oh, okay.
Very easily.
I think these skills and takeaways, I'm like trying to think, I'm like, okay, lying for the audience, like how are they going to apply that to their regular life? I'm like, okay, I think we can figure this out.
There is a level of course, people should not lie, and I'm not going to tell people to lie. But there is a certain level of bullshitting when you're at the beginning of your career that is very important, and I'll explain more. When I started my company, Muck Media, it's a media company. We do films and series, and we do Trafficked, the show. My show is done. And when I had just worked on a show with National Geographic, and they were interested in the kind of reporting that I do, so they reached out and said, we want to do a show with you, and it became Trafficked. And I pushed hard. Okay, I want my company to produce it. But at that time, we hadn't done any big series. And they were like, okay, so we're going to send our execs to LA to come to the office and to meet you guys and to see if you guys are really set up as a company. And at the time, we had just moved to a new space. It was a tiny little space. We barely had furniture. We definitely didn't have anything on the walls. And we went out and we basically printed all these fake posters for films we hadn't done, but we could have done. And we put them on the walls. We weren't telling them if they asked, did you do this? We wouldn't have said yes, but it looked legitimate, right? We bought a conference table. We actually got one of my partner Christina's husband, Alfie, to come in that day to
Just
pretend there were
busy.
more people in the office. And then they came and it looked like a totally legitimate business. And thank God we did it because, and here we are, 5 seasons of Trafficked, and we've done it really well. And we knew we were capable of doing it, but that initial let's a little bullshitting is enough,
Oh, I could go on for days.
Yes,
I could do a spin-off podcast on the ways that I've bullshit things for my company. Yeah, and I think that's okay as long as you can do it and you can deliver like an amazing product. How you get there is a little less important.
Yeah, I
agree.
I
think everyone needs like a foot in the door. Like I think for me, like I don't come from like any family in this industry. I knew no one when I moved here.
Same.
So it's like, what are we supposed to do?
Right.
There has to be a way. Like, you know what I mean? There's unless like you have to have someone give you that first initial shot that you're a little underqualified for, but you can push forward and you have that faith in yourself to make it happen.
Absolutely. We hired one of the first people we hired for Traffic was a guy who told us that he knew how to fly a drone because we needed him as a cameraman and a drone operator. He says, absolutely, I know how to fly a drone. He had no idea. He became the best drone operator there is, Josh Flanagan. I call him the king of the skies because he's so good at what he does. And, within the month after this conversation, we interviewed him. He went, learned how to fly a drone, and the moment that we started filming, he already knew how to fly it. So sometimes it's that. Or, I remember bullshitting about I did a documentary for Frontline World many years ago, and we were me and my husband, who I worked with for many years, who owns a production company with me as well, and we were calling the exec producer at Frontline and trying to convince her that to buy this story, this idea that we had. We wanted her to give us money to go and do this story idea. And we told her, we're actually in New York, but we knew the headquarters was in Boston. We're going to be in Boston next week. Could we come to your office? And of course we weren't going to be in Boston. We just wanted to be there and meet her face to face because it's easier than
you're gonna sell it.
Foot in the door. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah.
And you went and it worked.
We went and it worked. And it was the first commission we got.
That's amazing. Okay, so I do think there is definitely lessons in that for sure. Something that I also think that the audience can get a lot from you is your persistence. I saw on another show that you had mentioned you are a huge, obviously, Emmy winner, but there was many times that you didn't get the win. So tell the audience a little bit about that and what the journey's been to finally get to where you are today.
I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years now. That dates me, but it's the reality. And I've been nominated. I think at one point I had, 30-something nominations and had never actually won an Emmy. So I'd constantly go to the award ceremony and just have everybody else's name called on stage and not mine. And I thought, it's fine. Who cares? It's an
You're
Emmy.
nominated.
It's good to be nominated. That's what I would tell myself. Until there was a year, I think it was season 3, we had 5 nominations. We went to the Emmys. We thought, okay, 5, it's a good opportunity. And again, nothing. We came home with nothing. And then that was season 2. Season 3, we got 20 nominations. We couldn't believe it. And we thought, okay, this year it has to be. And that year, yes, 20 nominations. We got 5 Emmys. And then this past year, we got 29 nominations and we got 4 Emmys. But what I used to say is that I was like the Susan Lucci of the news and documentary Emmys, where I think she was nominated like 20-something times also and never got an Emmy. I finally got there. And the only reason why it's important to get an Emmy or why it feels good is because it's a recognition of the work that you do. My team and I, we work so hard, grueling hours, lots of sacrifices in our family and everything. So it's obviously a good recognition.
Well, and the reward for the work is more work, right? So you actually get to then, with that recognition, getting things greenlit is going to be easier. Getting other shows is going to be easier. So I see the point.
Yeah.
But as a viewer, there's not a huge, there's a difference in quality maybe, but season 1 to season 5, they're all good. Yeah. So it's so interesting with the way that the award shows work, because there actually isn't a giant crazy difference.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
I'll
tell you what happened. The first season we submitted it to the docs and not the news Emmys. And we were putting these 1-hour documentaries that were episodes of Trafficked against documentaries that had been, that were 1.5 hours and had been, years in the making. And so we had much less chance of
just
getting
an admin error.
It was an admin error.
Admin error. You should have had them years ago.
Hack the system. That's another good one.
Okay, so last one here too. Do you have a mantra for when you're in these crazy high pressure situations that you go back to?
Not so. My high pressure moments or situations is actually being interviewed much more than is being in front of a masked guy with a gun.
Really?
Nowadays I'm much better, but when I started, I would take beta blockers.
This would freak you out?
This would freak me out.
Really?
I would take beta blockers. Stages still freak me out. I do a lot of speaking engagements and I do go on stage, but they still make me nervous. And I think it's a little bit, I have this complex that I'm not very smart and I'm not going to sound smart. And I've had this forever. A little bit of what's the expression, when you think the syndrome.
Imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome,
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
The imposter syndrome,
I
I think we, particularly women, really
every
have
day.
that. Every day, yeah. And so I'd be very comfortable in a world where I'm surrounded with men with guns and masks and interviewing them. But then the moment that you're sitting me down and asking me questions or you're asking me to be on stage, I'd be really, really nervous. So my husband came up with a mantra that he uses and that he texts me every time I'm about to go on stage. Not so much with interviews nowadays. I'm much more comfortable, but it's an interesting one. And funnily enough, I actually think it's much more of a male mantra than it is a female mantra. It doesn't exactly work with me, but I use it because because it makes me think of him and how much he loves and supports me, I guess, and that makes me feel better. But it's YOTFR, which stands for "You own this fucking room."
Great. I'm going to start using that.
And actually, it's IOTFR because it's I own this fucking room. So that's what he repeats to himself, and that's what he tells me, you should repeat this in your head, and you're going to feel comfortable.
And so he's right by your side as you guys are filming these things.
No, he doesn't go in the field anymore. He used to. We traveled all around the world together until we had our son. And then it became harder for us to travel together. So he's an amazing, very accomplished director of his own documentaries, feature documentaries mainly. And we own a production company, which he, runs in many respects. And yeah, we are involved in each other's projects, but he doesn't come to the field with me mostly.
So you gotta I own this fucking room all by myself.
I know.
When it's that, you're like, we're here.
He texts it to me every time. Every time.
I love that.
I'm surprised he didn't actually text it to me today.
You're like, oh, I'm just talking to Jade. It's fine. I'm not scary. Okay, well, last wrap-up question. What advice would you give to young journalists today who are sort of just getting started in the age of social media and what we're looking at right now?
I would say determination. Obviously, it's my first lesson and should be everybody's first lesson. If you have a dream, be persistent. Don't let go. Nobody else is going to believe in yourself. It has to be you. It has to start with you. Also, be yourself. I remember when I started in my profession, when I had to speak to camera, I still am infatuated by Christiane Amanpour, my favorite journalist, CNN senior correspondent, incredible woman. And I always wanted to be Christiane Amanpour, so I would turn to camera and try to be Christiane Amanpour, and I couldn't be, and I wasn't being authentic. And I realized, okay, I have to just be myself. Everybody else is already taken, which is a cliche, but it is the reality. And then I would say that finding what is your passion. Not everybody wants to be reporting on black markets. Not everybody wants to be a journalist. Not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, a businesswoman. But whatever it is, you should wake up in the morning happy to go to work and doing what you love. And until you accomplish that and you find what that is, keep working at it.
Amazing. And could you give us a little overview on what you're up to next and what shows you might have coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm launching a podcast very, very soon in October. I'm very excited about it. It's called The Hidden Third because it's the estimated 30-something% of the global economy that economists call the hidden third, which are these black and gray markets. And I'll be interviewing criminals, outlaws, former criminals, law enforcement, anyone who's involved in these hidden worlds. So I'm very excited about that. I'm working on a project with National Geographic as well, and I have other projects that I can't talk about.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jade.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, that was great.
Good.
Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to follow and subscribe. We will be releasing episodes weekly.